Hoy vamos a hablar acerca del verbo ser. Today we're going to talk about the verb ser. Now in Spanish there are two different verbs that are for talking about the verb to be. In English we have to be, just like Shakespeare, to be or not to be. But in Spanish we have two, and they are distinctly different because one refers to a being that is different from the other. We'll talk about the verb estar in the next chapter, but this chapter begins with ser. And the reason for that is because this chapter, the introductory chapter, is about talking about oneself. And one of the first things that we start talking about in terms of our own selves is who we are. The verb ser is, again, the verb to be, but in this particular case, it is a permanent to be. It is anything that is absolutely permanent about your own identity. Things that either cannot be changed or that are very difficult to change. So, for example, soy maestro, okay? Which means I am a teacher. It is my profession. I studied for it. I went to college for it. I prepared for it. I internshiped at it. And now I have been a teacher. It's my profession. And I've been here for 20 years as a teacher. Let's not, we'll talk in detail more about what that actually means, especially when we start distinguishing between ser and estar. But remember, this is something that's a permanent nature. Now, you might say, okay, well, the last example, you talked about being permanent in a job, but, anybody can switch jobs. That's true. But in this case, we're not talking just about a job, like spending the summer working at an animal shelter, or heaven forbid, you have to go work at McDonald's as a fry cook for a summer. We're talking about the permanence of jobs. So we're talking about things like what you go to college for, becoming a doctor and then working as a doctor for many, many years. That's it. Okay? You're a student. Right now, you're a student at school. That's it. Okay? Because that's going to last a while. Whether it lasts, you've already been a student since kindergarten. You are a student here in high school. You're going to be a student in college, maybe even graduate school. So it's going to last a long time. So, we use ser. Ser has two particular things, okay? It is permanent, okay? As we've already said, it is absolutely permanent and it's going to last a while. Number two, there are things that are not easily changed, okay? So no change. You will see me use this symbol a lot. Okay, this is delta. Okay, and I used to teach math, so sometimes I use this to represent change. Okay, so things that are permanent or have difficulty changing, they last for a really long time. Okay, so in this case, ser can be used when I talk about things that are but don't always change. Okay. Now, in the Spanish language, in the first section, we talked about greetings and those kinds of things. But here, we're going to talk about, it's the first time we actually see a verb and verb conjugations. Now, you're in Spanish 1. I know many of you maybe know a few things here and there about Spanish. You may even have taken a Spanish class before. But we're going to start from the very beginning, just in case for those that have not. When we conjugate a verb, we conjugate it with pronouns. Okay? A pronoun is a word that takes the place of, it replaces a noun. Okay? Now, just like in English, I, yo, you, tú, él, he, ella, she, usted, which is the formal you, like sir, nosotros, we, vosotros, all of you, ellos, all of them, masculine, ellas, all of them, feminine, and ustedes, which is all of you, plural. Okay? And we'll talk later about the differences between ustedes and vosotros later on. Okay? So these are what we do. Okay? I, you, he, she, it, we, all of you, they. Okay? Now, in English, we have to include the pronoun with most verbs, okay? Because except for the third person singular, he, she, it, all the conjugations for all the verbs are the same, okay? So we have, for example, I eat. Okay? I have to say I, because if I don't, we don't really know who we're talking about. So for example, I eat, we eat, they eat. Those don't change. All of you eat. The verb eat does not change, so we have to include the pronoun in order to know exactly what we're talking about. In Spanish, we don't. In Spanish, we don't. We add it for emphasis, but the only time we really need to include the subject pronoun is when we're talking in third person. Okay, so remember that. Okay, if you are talking about first person, second person, singular, or plural, you don't have to include the subject pronoun, except for emphasis. Okay? Third person, you have to include it because that's conjugated for 3 different people in the third person. So just so we know what we're talking about. Okay? So we conjugate. Notice that each one of these conjugations is different. Okay? We're no longer talking about eat. Okay? I eat. You eat. We eat. All of you eat. Okay? In English it's the same, but in Spanish it's not. It's very different. Okay? So, para el verbo ser, soy, eres, es, somos, sois, son. Now you may have taken a Spanish class where you didn't have to learn the vosotros. Okay? The vosotros is really only used in Spain, a couple parts in Latin America, and there are parts in Latin America where we change this a little bit to not just be vosotros, but vos. Okay? In this class, you have to know it because you're going to have to learn to read some literature later on. Okay? And a lot of it is written in Spain, and you have to know vosotros. So it's important to know it. And if you travel to Spain, or you're in a class with another teacher who's from Spain, you're going to hear the vosotros. So you have to learn this. Okay? Don't ask. You have to learn it. Okay? Soy. I am. Eres, you are. Es, he, she, it is. Somos, we are. Sois, all of you are. Son, all of them are, or all of you in Latin America are. Okay? So vosotros in Spain, ustedes in Latin America. Okay? Because we're in the United States, most of the immigrants in the United States are from Latin America, so they will use ustedes. Very few of them will use vosotros. Okay? So, ser, we use for anything that is permanent. Anything that is permanent. It doesn't matter what it is. Okay? So if I'm talking about my own identity, okay, where you were born, ser. You can't go back and change where you were born. Okay? You were born in the United States, or maybe in Mexico, or in Chile, like me, or in Spain, like some other teachers. It all happened in a one-time instance that cannot be changed at this point. It is permanent. Okay? Now, if I say, I am from Chile, it's ser. If I say, I am in Chile, then it's going to be the other verb, which is estar, and we'll get to that later on. Okay? So you have to think, is it permanent? Is it permanent? If I say, well, let's go back to our first example. If I say, I am working at a bookstore for the summer, that I am, would it be soy? No. It's going to be the other verb, estar, because I don't plan on working at the bookstore forever, and it's not really a profession. Okay? So, if I am a doctor, it's going to be soy. Soy doctor. Okay? So, this chapter talks a lot about which identities that a person has as introductions and introducing yourself to other people. So, for the exercises here, everything is going to be said. But it's important to know right now that said is also going to be something that we talk about when it's permanent. Okay? And there are going to be certain situations where you can use either ser or estar, and it's going to be defined on which one you use, whether that situation is correct or not. Okay? The difference between soy loco and estoy loco. Soy loco means I'm always crazy. Estoy loco means I'm crazy right now, like I'm going crazy over something in particular. Okay? Now it's time to learn the song.